Well, good evening, and welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This is the study for Friday, June 13, 2025. And, we'll be picking up shortly where we left off last week in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 9. We're going to get to some very dark history for both the southern and northern kingdoms of Israel. Once they were divided, then the southern kingdom became known as Judah, and the northern kingdom retained the title Israel. Today, Judah and Israel together, what's available to them is still known now as Israel, although Palestine is the name for the territory prior to 1948, and still a lot of the area is known as that. And get this on to speaker here so my wife can join us. Are you there?
You forgot to call me.
Yeah, I was in the middle of things and just forgot. Sorry.
I can hear you talking.
Yeah. News this week has been, well, I would use the term rather grim, but that was the punchline of a joke from back in the mid-'80s. You may remember that one time there was a sports game that ran over into the time for the evening newscast. And I won't say the name of the network, but I will say that the news anchor's last name was Rather. That leads into the punchline I'm about to give you. And so when they finally did come to the news, this anchor had left in something of a snit and wasn't there when the cameras came on to begin the newscast. And this became kind of a thing in the nation, that this man had done this, that he was upset that his network had let the game take over part of his program and had left the scene briefly. Well, not very long after that, this particular anchor had an interview with the Vice President of the United States, who was running for his own term as President of the United States. You may recall his name was George Bush the elder. And during the interview, the newsman started asking some, the kind of hard questions that news people like to ask prominent people and politicians. And this candidate brought up the anchor's being missing, the incident from earlier. And so then that became a really big deal. And so most people in the nation were aware of this on-air confrontation between this politician and this news anchor. So you've got the name Bush and the name Rather. In the local market where I lived at the time, there was a county, in that state they were supervisors. The county was run by the supervisors of each of the towns that made up the county. Each town provided a supervisor to a board of supervisors, and one of these supervisors was a man with a last name of Fry, and I don't remember the first name any longer. I probably don't remember the first name of the newsman involved, but one of the local anchors with the last name of Grimm got this Mr. Fry on the air, on television, and doing an interview. And he began to ask some rather hard questions. And the politician said, "Are you doing me like?" And he named the other two politician journalist names that were in everybody's mind at the time. And I just happened to be watching that station at the time that interview took place. So I actually saw this confrontation happen in real time. The next morning, the anchors on a local radio program came up with this little punchline for the story: frying bush, rather grim. You'd have to, the names fit into that little line that they gave, and it's stuck with me ever since then. Probably some of you were aware of that incident between Rather and Bush. You may not have been aware of the Grimm-Fry confrontation because that was in a more localized situation and not everybody saw it. Anyway, the other thing in the news, well, there's two things. One of them is, we were talking about Israel. Israel has launched attacks against Iran. That's not their nearest neighbor, that's the neighbor farther away that they consider a big enemy. And Iran has in turn launched attacks against Israel. So all this is going on, and the people whose theology comes from the Schofield Bible are probably all up in arms about how this is a sign that the end of time is almost upon us. They're fighting over Israel again. I won't go on into that. That's just what's going on. The other big item, well, there's a couple of more. One of them because my wife used to live there, and that is the flooding in San Antonio, Texas. And I happened on a live stream. It wasn't live when I watched it, but it was a live stream from a local TV channel of first responders out trying to find a motorist who got carried away in some of the flooding. It was believed that this person had not survived, so it was now a recovery operation, but they were out looking for it. If you're familiar with the geography of San Antonio, this is where Leon Creek crosses US 90 on its way west out of San Antonio. And that's where their footage was coming from. There was aviation news. This was in India. Boeing 787 took off, didn't get very high in its flight, and came back down and killed all but one of the persons on board the airplane. The one person was a British citizen, and the pictures I've seen seem to indicate he's in the hospital, but he did survive the crash. And I've heard lots of speculation about the cause of the crash. The first one I heard used the audio from one of the cameras that recorded the incident, and he suggested that there wasn't enough noise, and he believed maybe there had been a dual engine failure on the aircraft. So it didn't have, after it got off the ground, the engines failed, and it didn't have the time to get back around. All it could do was come down because it didn't have the power to keep it in flight. Another theory that I heard was that possibly one of the pilots, possibly the first officer, had, instead of raising the landing gear, which is normally done almost immediately after you attain flight and you've got a positive climb rate, as soon as the pilot flying confirms that they got a positive climb rate, he'll call out gear up, and the other pilot, the one that's not flying, the pilot monitoring, will reach over to the lever on the essentially the dashboard in front of them and lift that up, and the aircraft will then begin to retract the landing gear and cover it up to give improved aerodynamic characteristics to the aircraft, which of course helps in flight. The speculation was that instead of raising the landing gear, the pilot monitoring got the wrong lever and retracted the flaps instead. I personally find that unlikely, simply because it's a very different motion. If you're raising the landing gear, you reach to the dashboard at the front of the cockpit and you move your arm up. You're moving straight up. In order to retract the flaps, you would have to reach down to the part of the console between the two pilots, and there's a lever there next to, usually it's next to the throttles, and you would have to move that forward, not up, but forward. And for somebody to make co-pilot on a flight like that, they would have to have done that many times. Usually by the time you get to an airline and are able to fly something as big as a 787, you've flown smaller aircraft, all of which have similar types of controls and similar layouts. They're not all the same, obviously, but similar. So you would be able to lift the landing gear almost in your sleep. And the same thing with getting the various flap settings. The other thing is very simply that the landing gear is a single movement. It's just down to up. The flaps have multiple settings, from fully extended various degrees up to fully retracted. So there would be notches that you would feel as you moved it. So I personally doubt that. Now, there's a possibility, and this has to do with something I just recently watched. I watched a documentary on an aircraft crash in 1999 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. There's an airport that's right off the coast in Buenos Aires, and at this airport, this was a 737, the aircraft started to take off, got up off the runway, but not very far, and never really got a positive climb rate. Eventually slammed back down on the runway. By then they didn't have enough time to stop. The aircraft ran off the end of the runway, across a highway, killed a couple of people in a car, and killed something like 60 more people or more when it crashed into a gas plant off the end of the runway. In that case, the pilots not only had failed to extend the flaps, they had, during their takeoff run, just essentially ignored the warnings telling them that the plane wasn't set up right. They shouldn't be trying to take off. They tried to take off anyway. There was an incident in Detroit back in, I think, 1987, when MD-80 style aircraft, I'm not sure exactly what it was, it might have been a DC-9, but the DC-9 gave birth to the MD-80. They're both laid out very similarly. Tried to take off without extending the flaps and came down and crashed into the embankment next to an interstate off the end of the runway, killing everybody on board except for one little girl, Were you going to say something?
You there?
Yeah,
Oh, you went black. Wait, can I say something?
sure.
Back when I lived in the Australian outback, I was a bush pilot, and I learned how to lift those landing gears with just my thumb.
And if you believe that, there's a bridge on the eastern coast of the United States I can sell you real cheap.
Really?
If you know my wife, you understand what she's up to there. So anyway, there's a possibility that the flaps, that somehow in this case in India, that the pilots somehow neglected to extend the flaps. And it's hard to tell from the footage that's available because it's from quite a distance if that's the case or not. Anyway, something happened. And so that's the news from this week. And I have to take a quick break. I will be right back. You want to say something while I'm out?
I could sing. I do enough singing without having to try. The progression of this neurological problem I've got has really turned goofy. I make the weirdest noises. I'll be turning the phone off if I start. I hear him. He's done.
Sorry about that little exigency there. Had to take care of. Hopefully that's it for the evening and we can continue. So we'll be getting into our Bible study, so let's bow our heads and begin. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for the written word. We thank you even more for the living word, Jesus Christ, the life, the truth, and the way. We understand that as humans, we don't really have a clear grasp of all the things that need to be healed in us. We just know that we're broken and we need the healing. As we open the written word now, we ask that the Holy Spirit will come close to each person who joins us, that person can receive a blessing that will aid them in receiving the mercy and healing you offer. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I have a little note posted over here to help me remember everything I need to do in getting this going in the evening. And it looks like I have done everything that's on the list so far. So we're into our review. Now, last week we started chapter 9 of 2 Kings and we got down to the end of the story of how Elisha sent a young prophet, a young man from the company of the prophets, and gave him very specific instructions to anoint Jehu to be king over Israel, and then to hightail it, to leave the place immediately. And we read how he called Jehu out from the group of men that he was conversing with, gave him that information, anointed him with the oil, and then left. And the men asked him what was up, and he said, well, you know, the kind of crazy things these guys say. But then he told them what it was, and they immediately acclaimed him as king of Israel. So that's where we left off last week, and now we're at verse 14, and it says, So Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, led a conspiracy against King Joram. Now recall, Joram was one of the sons of Ahab. The first one, Ahaziah, is the one who called Elijah when Elijah called down fire on 2 companies of soldiers. And he only lasted for a couple of years. And because he didn't have any sons yet, his brother, Joram, took over as king. And while we can't be certain, at least some of the miracles recorded with Elisha that involved the king of Israel probably involved King Joram, including the siege of Samaria that we read about last week. This was probably Joram, although we can't be absolutely certain. The stories may have, they're told out of order because, they get to telling one thing and then they go back and tell another thing. So King Jehu may have been the king for some of these things. But at any rate, this is the king against whom Jehu now leads a conspiracy. And then in parentheses it tells us, now Joram had been with the army at Ramoth Gilead, defending Israel against the forces of King Hazael of Aram. Now, King Hazael of Aram was appointed to that task, in a sense, by Elisha, who cried after he told him that, because he knew all the terrible things that Hazael would do to the people of Israel. But King Joram was wounded in the fighting and returned to Jezreel to recover from his wounds. Now, I think the footnote there is going to tell us that the Hebrew says Jehoram. But it's a variant spelling of Joram. And to some extent, you've got a lot of kings with very similar names here because of the bond between Israel and Judah formed by Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, during the days of Ahab. So that Ahaziah, king of Israel, had the same name as Ahaziah, the son of King Jehoram of Judah. And I think a lot of times the Bibles will use Joram for the king of Israel and Jehoram for the king of Judah, just for the confusion. Otherwise, the two of them are reigning to some extent at the same time as each other. So, get back to where we were. He was wounded in the fighting, returned not to Samaria, but to Jezreel. Now, Samaria was now the capital of Israel, but Ahab and his sons used Jezreel very often as a kind of a auxiliary palace, if you wish. And Jezreel is where Naboth's vineyard was, all that story, and that's about to come into things here. So he went there to recover from his wounds, and Jehu told the men with him, if you want me to be king, don't let anyone leave town and go to Jezreel to report what we have done. He wants to take the city of Jezreel by surprise. Then Jehu got into a chariot and rode to Jezreel to find King Joram, who was lying there wounded. King Ahaziah of Judah was there too, for he had gone to visit him. Now, we haven't read this part yet, but Ahaziah was the son of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat. So Ahaziah was the grandson of Jehoshaphat, and we're going to see more about that as we move on here. Just for now, know that. Now, Ahaziah's mother was Joram's sister. We're going to get her name in a little bit. So he's up there visiting King Joram, who's wounded. He's in Jezreel. The watchman on the tower of Jezreel saw Jehu and his company approaching. So he shouted to Joram, I see a company of troops coming. Send out a rider to ask if they are coming in peace, King Joram ordered. So a horseman went out to meet Jehu and said, "The king wants to know if you are coming in peace." Jehu replied, "What do you know about peace? Fall in behind me." The watchman called out to the king, "The messenger has met them, but he's not returning." So the king sent out a second horseman. He rode up to them and said, "The king wants to know if you come in peace." Again Jehu answered, "What do you know about peace? Fall in behind me." The watchman exclaimed, "The messenger has met them, but he isn't returning either." Then he adds, "It must be Jehu, son of Nimshi, for he's driving like a madman." I think the King James says, "Behold, he driveth furiously," or something like that. From which we get the saying that I included in our subtitle, he drives like Jehu. If he drives recklessly and in great speed and so forth, that we say he drives like Jehu. What's that?
Drives like a teenager.
I wonder what the watchman actually meant here by saying, drives like a madman. He drives like he's crazy. I don't think it had to do with the speed with which he drove, because the horsemen were easily able to outpace him, and the watchman was able to say, "Wait a minute, they've gotten there, they should be turning around and coming back," and they're not. They should be able to outpace him. So it's not a case of his speed. It might be a level of reckless abandon with which he drove, and we're going to see aspects of his character as we go through this story that suggest that he was a careless and violent man. The watchman exclaimed, okay, we just read that verse 21. "Quick, get my chariot ready," King Joram commanded. It sounds like he had some clue what was up. Then King Joram of Israel and King Ahaziah of Judah rode out in their chariots to meet Jehu. They met him at the plot of land that had belonged to Naboth of Jezreel. King Joram demanded, "Do you come in peace, Jehu?" That's the same question the others asked. Jehu replied, "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel are all around us?" Then King Joram turned the horses around and fled. Footnote C, turned his hands. Okay, well, if he was on horses, he probably had to turn them in order to flee. But at any rate, he fled, shouting to King Ahaziah, "Treason, Ahaziah!" Well, yeah, this was treason. It's going to be pretty clear here in a moment. But Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he sank down dead in his chariot. So this isn't like the death of Joram's father, who was wounded by archers and who spent all day propped up in his chariot watching the battle before he died. Jehu was a better shot. He pierced the heart with his arrow, and Joram died pretty much immediately. Jehu said to Bidkar, his officer, "Throw him into the plot of land that belonged to Naboth of Jezreel. Do you remember when you and I were riding along behind his father Ahab? The Lord pronounced this message against him: I solemnly swear that I will repay him here on this plot of land, says the Lord, for the murder of Naboth and his sons that I saw yesterday. So throw him out on Naboth's property, just as the Lord said." And that, of course, would have been through Elijah. We read that several weeks back. When King Ahaziah of Judah saw what was happening, he fled along the road to Beth-Hogan. Jehu rode after him, shouting, "Shoot him too!" So they shot Ahaziah in his chariot at the ascent of Gur near Ibleam. He was able to go on as far as Megiddo, but he died there. Now, Megiddo is not that far from Jezreel, so all these other places, a fairly short order, and he may not have died as quickly as Joram, but he died fairly quickly. There was a footnote there. As in the Greek and Syriac versions, the Hebrew lacks, so they shot Ahaziah. All right. So, now we have the king of Israel and the king of Judah both assassinated on the same day. So this is a kind of an anchor point if you want to go through and map out the reigns of the various kings of both kingdoms, the mysterious number of the Hebrew kings. This is a point that you can anchor things down at, because both of these kings died on the same day. So we can link that together. The reign of Ahaziah and the reign of Joram ended at the same time. So the reigns that will follow them, Jehu, and we'll see what it is in Judah here shortly, those also begin at the same time and give us an opportunity to try to link them up and map them out. I did that once years ago. I actually sat down and tried to map out on paper, okay, this king reigned till here and this king reigned till here, and you had to kind of fudge things here and there. I did not read Professor Thiele's book. I didn't follow what he said necessarily. I just did the best I could with the information that I was able to get out of the books of Kings. His servants took him by chariot. We're talking about Ahaziah here. By chariot to Jerusalem, where they buried him with his ancestors in the city of David, or Jerusalem. Ahaziah had become king over Judah in the 11th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab. When Jezebel, the queen mother, now she was queen mother in Israel because she was the mother of King Jehu, heard that Jehu had come to Jezreel, she painted her eyelids and fixed her hair and sat at a window. When Jehu entered the gate of the palace, she shouted at him, "Have you come in peace, you murderer? You're just like Zimri, who murdered his master." Now you may recall Zimri murdered a descendant, I believe, of Jeroboam the first, and became king, but he didn't last very long because then Jezebel's father-in-law, Omri, murdered Zimri and took over as king in his place, and then his son Ahab, Jezebel's husband, became king when his father passed. So she's not talking about Omri because she's related to him. So she uses the previous treasonist or insurrectionist, whatever you want to call him. She names Zimri, who murdered his master. And footnote E for that, where Zimri killed his master, King Elah. Jehu looked up and saw her at the window and shouted, "Who is on my side?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. "Throw her down," Jehu yelled. So they threw her out the window, and her blood spattered against the wall and on the horses. And Jehu trampled her body under his horses' hooves. So the eunuchs who were charged with caring for the queen mother perhaps out of fear, because they knew who Jehu was and knew what he was like. Now he's calling for them to do something, and they don't have a lot of fear for any of Jezebel's relatives, given that Jehu's already been killing them. But they do fear Jehu, so they grab the woman and toss her out. And then, to make sure she's dead, Jehu gets up there and has his horse stomp all over her body. Then Jehu went into the palace and ate and drank. This is another clue to his character. If you can do something that grisly and ghastly, and then immediately go in and eat and drink, you have a seared conscience. Afterward, he said, "Someone go and bury this cursed woman, for she is the daughter of a king of a different country." Ought to show her some respect, just for the sake of relations between the two countries. But when they went out to bury her, they only found her skull, her feet, and her hands. When they returned and told Jehu, he stated, "This fulfills the message from the Lord, which he spoke through his servant Elijah from Tishbe. At the plot of land in Jezreel, dogs will eat Jezebel's body. Her remains will be scattered like dung on the plot of land in Jezreel, so that no one will be able to recognize her."
You know what's kind of interesting?
What?
Well, I don't know, maybe it isn't, but to me it's kind of interesting. You're in Bible Gateway?
Yes.
The one over there on the left to the study tool.
You mean on the right?
No, on the left. It's red. There's a list. Read the Bible Study Tools, Bible Gateway Plus, explore more.
Oh, I've got an ad over there.
Oh. Well, I do too, down underneath that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I go up to the top, I had scrolled to the bottom, so then it scrolled off the screen.
Click on Study Tool.
Try that again. You got cut off.
Click on Study Tools.
And
And what's your option?
scripture engagement and more resources.
More resources.
Okay.
Now your options.
Bible Gateway Plus, reading plans, the Bible Gateway app, the Bible Gateway Bible audio app, audio Bibles, commentaries.
Yeah, commentaries and dictionaries, encyclopedias, things.
Okay.
Go to each Bible dictionary and look up Jezebel.
Which Bible dictionary?
Easton.
Easton's Bible Dictionary.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to click the J there and scroll down. Looks like I'm going to have to go a ways. There's Jezebel. Jezebel chased the daughter of Baal, the king of the Sidonians, and the wife of Ahab, the king of Israel. 1 Kings 16:31. This was the first time that the king of Israel had allied himself by marriage with the heathen princes. Well, I suppose Israel, not Judah. And the alliance was, in this case, of a particularly disastrous kind. Jezebel has stamped her name on history as a representative of all that is designing, crafty, malicious, revengeful, and cruel. She is the first great instigator of persecution against the saints of God. Guided by no principle, restrained by no fear of either God or man, passionate in her attachment to her heathen worship, she spared no pains to maintain idolatry around her in all its splendor. 450 prophets, ministered under her care to Baal, besides 400 prophets of the groves, or prophets of the Asherah, which ate at her table, 1 Kings 18:19. The idolatry, too, was of the most debased and sensual kind. Her conduct was in many aspects very disastrous to the kingdom both of Israel and Judah, 21:1 through 29. At length she came to an untimely end. As Jehu rode into the gates of Jezreel, she looked out at the window of the palace and said, "Had Zimri peace, who slew his master?" He looked and called to her chamberlains, who instantly threw her from the window, so that she was dashed to pieces on the street, and his horses trod her under their feet. She was immediately consumed by the dogs of the street, 2 Kings 9:7-37, according to the word of Elijah the Tishbite, 1 Kings 21:19. Her name afterwards came to be used as the synonym for a wicked woman. See Revelation 2, verse 20. It may be noted that she is said to have been the grand aunt of Dido, the founder of Carthage. Is that what you were wanting me to get to?
Yeah.
Okay.
You were talking about it, and I remembered that, reading that earlier, and to me it was kind of interesting.
Okay.
According to this Easton person, she was not a nice person. Somewhere I came across a dictionary, a Bible dictionary, that said Jezebel was actually a nickname that meant something like filthy bitch. But I don't remember what the reference was. I don't know.
Well, some people have made a big deal out of the element of the narration there that she painted her eyelids, and I think King James said painted her face and did up her hair.
Yeah.
So she's a wicked woman. You shouldn't wear makeup because then you'll be like Jezebel who painted her face.
Well, you take a cherry and bite it and then rub it on your lips. That's your lipstick or your gob smear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard that before. I remember hearing that growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do it Jezebel.
It's just an element of the narrative. She prepared herself to look nice, but she probably had some clue what was going on. I mean, what she said about Zimri indicates she knew that Jehu had killed her son.
Well, Jezebel would be a reflection of her character, not what she chose to wear,
Right.
which is a misunderstanding from where we grew up. Can't wear that because it'll make you a Jezebel.
Yeah.
No. Putting a little foundation on your face won't make you a Jezebel.
What's more important is her control addiction. Everybody's got to do the way I do it because I'm right. And her scheming and craftiness. Well, I know how to get Naboth's land, and so she spills out this plan, and people do it. I mean, you stop to think about the kind of power this woman had. She says, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I don't have your head by nightfall." And Elijah turned around and ran.
Terror.
What?
It's an absolute terror.
Yeah.
However, where'd she learn that? What happened to her to cause her to be like that?
Well, what was her dad like?
Make judgments on her character because we don't know where she learned that.
Well, we can make judgments on her character, but we can also understand that there may have been a reason that led up to that. Still, in the end, she bears responsibility for how she chose to deal with whatever she faced in life.
That's where you have to learn to separate the person from the behavior.
Right.
A person and the behavior are not the same thing.
Right. Moving
So,
on.
if somebody were to ask me, do you like this? Suppose there's somebody who's been really mean and vile, and if somebody were to ask me, do you like that person? I would have to say, I love the person, but I don't like the behavior.
Yeah. Like your grandniece.
Like what?
Like your grandniece.
Oh, yeah.
Her grandniece sent her a message filled with invective and cruelty. And anyway, that was at a time when they were stressed out because they had lost, well, in their case, their great-grandmother. Moving on to 2 Kings chapter 10. Ahab had 70 sons living in the city of Samaria. Now, I'm going to suggest to you here that while Ahab had 70 sons, Jezebel didn't. So this tells me that Ahab was not faithful to Jezebel. One woman, 70 sons, probably not possible. But it says he had 70 sons. So, like most of the kings in those days, he probably had something of a harem and a number of concubines, and they still counted as his sons. And it says they were living in the city of Samaria. Samaria was the actual capital. Jezreel kind of served as adjunct capital from time to time. So these sons are all living in Samaria. They were probably born there. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the elders and officials of the city. Footnote A, as in some Greek manuscripts and the Latin Vulgate, see also chapter 10, verse 6. The Hebrew reads, of Jezreel. Interesting. Well, if they lived in Samaria and he sends notes to the elders of Jezreel, well, the two cities were relatively close. The elders of Jezreel may have had some authority in Samaria as well. At any rate, and to the guardians of King Ahab's sons, which would have been in Samaria, probably. He said, the king's sons are with you, and you have at your disposal chariots, horses, a fortified city, and weapons. As soon as you receive this letter, select the best qualified of your master's sons to be your king, and prepare to fight for Ahab's dynasty. So, he's killed both Joram and Ahaziah, the kings of Israel and Judah both. He's ordered and assisted in the death of the queen mother, Jezebel. And now he asks these people in Jezreel and Samaria, pick one of your master's son, make him your king, and prepare to fight, to support him, and to maintain the dynasty. But they were paralyzed with fear. They knew Jehu. They knew how ruthless and bloodthirsty he was. They said, we've seen that 2 kings couldn't stand against this man. What can we do? So the palace and city administrators, together with the elders and the guardians of the king's sons, sent this message to Jehu. We are your servants and will do anything you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is best. Jehu responded with a second letter. If you are on my side and are going to obey me, bring the heads of your master's sons to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow. Now, it sounds like he's in Jezreel. We know he got there because that's where he had Jezebel murdered, and where he finished the job. So he's probably still there. So he's talking to the people both of Jezreel and of Samaria, and he's saying, all right, if you're on my side, here's how you can prove it. Bring me the heads of your master's sons by this time tomorrow. Now, the 70 sons of the king were being cared for by the leaders of Samaria, where they had been raised since childhood. When the letter arrived, the leaders killed all 70 of the king's sons. They placed their heads in baskets and presented them to Jehu at Jezreel. A messenger went to Jehu and said, they have brought the heads of the king's sons. So Jehu ordered, pile them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate and leave them there until morning. Beginning to sound really grisly here. This guy's got a penchant for gore and for demonstrating his his cruelty, which provides him with his power. You know, the law of the jungle. The meanest one, the one able to dish out the most punishment, he's the one who wins. He's the one in charge. In the morning, he went out and spoke to the crowd that had gathered around them. And I find this speech entirely odd, and I'm not sure I can make sense of it. Because he starts out saying, you are not to blame, he told them. I am the one who conspired against my master and killed him. I killed Joram. But who killed all these? I guess I'm not following his logic, and maybe that's because I'm not from his time and culture. I'm not able to parse out why he starts out telling them they're not to blame and then asks the questions, but who killed all these? Well, the men who wanted to ally themselves with Jehu had killed them. But then he continues, you can be sure that the message of the Lord that was spoken concerning Ahab's family will not fail. The Lord declared through his servant Elijah that this would happen. Then Jehu killed all who were left of Ahab's relatives living in Jezreel, and all his important officials, his personal friends, and his priests. So Ahab was left without a single survivor. Not a very safe day to live in Israel. And you can understand why Jehu would do this. Because he wants to make sure that there is no lingering loyalty to Ahab among the people in the country that would lead to somebody trying to do to him what he was now doing to the house of Ahab. This is the culture and the violence of the time. This is the degradation of the earth because of sin. And the Bible narrative here spells it out for us, and it doesn't particularly pull its punches. It tells us what happened in all its gruesome detail. And I think part of the reason for that is to help make the point of what happens to the human race when it departs from God's creation plan for the race. The point is, Ahab was left without a single survivor, so now Jehu can take over as king without opposition. Then Jehu set out for Samaria. Along the way, while he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds, he met some relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah. "Who are you?" he asked them. And they replied, "We are relatives of King Ahaziah. We are going to visit the sons of King Ahab and the sons of the queen mother." "Take them alive," Jehu shouted to his men. And they captured all 42 of them and killed them at the well of Beth Eked. None of them escaped. Now you have to, that does not entirely make sense. Jehu says take them alive, so they captured them and then killed them. I guess he wanted them to die knowing who was doing the killing, and knowing, and maybe even making a public spectacle of it. This is how Jehu rules. You better not cross him. When Jehu left there, he met Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was coming to meet him. After they had greeted each other, Jehu said to him, "Are you as loyal to me as I am to you?" "Yes, I am," Jehonadab replied. "If you are," Jehu said, "then give me your hand." So Jehonadab put out his hand, and Jehu helped him into the chariot. Then Jehu said, "Now come with me and see how devoted I am to Yahweh." So Jehonadab rode along with him. When Jehu arrived in Samaria, he killed everyone who was left there from Ahab's family, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. Then Jehu called a meeting of all the people of the city and said to them, "Ahab's worship of Baal was nothing compared to the way I will worship him. Therefore summon all the prophets and worshippers of Baal and call together all his priests. See to it that every one of them comes, for I am going to offer a great sacrifice to Baal. Anyone who fails to come will be put to death." Or with all the death that surrounded Jehu so far, this is a credible threat. And then it kind of adds almost parenthetically, but Jehu's cunning plan was to destroy all the worshippers of Baal. Then Jehu ordered, "Prepare a solemn assembly to worship Baal." So they did. He sent messengers throughout all Israel, summoning those who worshiped Baal. They all came, not a single one remained behind, and they filled the temple of Baal from one end to the other. And Jehu instructed the keeper of the wardrobe, "Be sure that every worshiper of Baal wears one of these robes." So robes were given to them. So, kind of put yourself in their place. There's a new king. He's a violent man. He's already killed a lot of people. Now he says he's going to double down on the worship of Baal. So you hear the summons, you show up, whether out of fear or whether you're really intent on showing up to worship Baal, you show up. And when you get there, this king, this new violent ruler, provides you with a special robe. Then Jehu went into the temple of Baal with Jehonadab, son of Rechab. Jehu said to the worshippers of Baal, "Make sure no one who worships the Lord is here, only those who worship Baal." So they were all inside the temple to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now this is, I think, fascinating because it tells us that this idea of animal sacrifices as an act of worship was a cultural thing in that territory. The worshippers of Baal did it. So when the worshippers of Yahweh do it, worshiping in the way they understand to worship based on the culture of the people around them. Now, Jehu had stationed 80 of his men outside the building and had warned them, if you let anyone escape, you will pay for it with your own life. Again, given Jehu and his character, that's a credible threat. As soon as Jehu had finished sacrificing the burnt offering, he commanded his guards and officers, go in and kill all of them. Don't let a single one escape. So they killed them all with their swords, and the guards and officers dragged their bodies outside. Then Jehu's men went into the innermost fortress of the temple of Baal. They dragged out the sacred pillar used in the worship of Baal and burned it. They smashed the sacred pillar and wrecked the temple of Baal, converting it into a public toilet as it remains to this day.
Hey,
What?
I need you to cut it short. I'm getting sick. I need you to cut it short.
Well, all right. We are near the end of a chapter here. She's requested that I cut it short, so since we're streaming live, I guess we kind of have to do that. This is about a half hour short of what we would normally do, but we'll just pick up here where we were next week, and so we'll stop even though it's a little early, and invite you to join us next week, and then say that until then, goodbye and God bless.
Bye, everyone.